We have now reached the point that we have been longing for, the time to write our first Java program. The goal we will set will be to produce a file that will compile correctly, will run correctly, and what it will do when it runs is something very simple, something but that conventionally we do at the first program we write at any language we learn. And that is, we want the program to print a message on the screen, and that message typically is the message "Hello World." Now, what will we need in order to achieve that? First of all, we need to be running our code in a machine that has the Java development kit. In other words, we need to make sure that we have a Java compiler, the Java compiler that will produce the bytecode, and the Java in-time compiler, the very last step that will take the bytecode and produce the executable code in the specific system that we are running our code. Now, if you are using, for example, a university lab machine, the JDK will most likely be already installed for you, so you don't have to do anything. But if you want to be able to develop programs in your own home machine, a laptop or a desktop, and you want to be able also to execute them, then you need to install in your own machine the JDK. And how would you do that? It is not very complicated. You would go into a search engine and look for, you may type something like download JDK. And from the results, one of the first ones, if not the very first one, will be the Oracle website where you can download the JDK from. You will have several options to choose from, as you see on your screen. What you actually want to do is download the latest stable JDK version, the Java Development Kit. You don't need to worry about the server JRE or the simple JRE. The JRE is included in the JDK. The JDK has additional tools for a developer. Also, you don't have to download NetBeans. We will come back to that in a little bit. So after you have made sure you have in your system the JDK installed, you have a Java compiler that will be able to process the source files that you will be writing, the program. Then the question is, how are we going to write our source files? What tools do we need? One option is to use an editor and the command line, as we say. You can use any kind of editor, any kind of text editor in order to write down your code. Any kind of text editor that is already installed in your system. All you have to do is write down your source, write down the lines of code you want, and then save your file with an extension .java. It shouldn't be .txt or .whatever else. It should be an extension .java. And then after you have that file, we're going to take that file and run commands on it through the command line, through the terminal. Now, let me go back a little bit to the editor discussion. There are, as I said, any editor will do. All we want to do is actually write a text, not a text file, actually write text, the commands in the Java programming language. However, there are some editors that are very popular and they have some specific features that usually help us if our goal is to write a program. One of them is the Emacs editor, the GNU Emacs editor, and this is a website where you would be able to download it. Again, if you're working on a university lab machine, it is very likely that Emacs will already be installed, and so will most likely be the case with the editor VI. Emacs and VI are two editors that have been around for a long time, and programmers love usually one of them. They have very strong feelings for one over the other several times, but most likely both of these editors will be available in a system like a university lab machine. Both of these editors have their own little commands that you will have to become familiar with when you want to save a file, when you want to do something like split the screen into two different windows and so forth. It is something that you will have to become familiar with, but they are, in their bare bones, just text editors that you can write your Java source file. So after you have the text editor, then you will need to use, you will write your Java program, and then you will need to write down the commands in order to compile that program and run the program. And we will talk more about the terminal in a little bit. So this is the first option, and this is how we will start. We will start with an editor and the terminal in order to produce our programs. The second option, to which we will switch later, will be to use, as we have already mentioned, an IDE, an integrated development environment. What is the difference between the IDE and the first option that we just mentioned? The IDEs not only have the editor window in them, but also you can have buttons that you will click and they will compile the file. You can click on another button and run your code. And they have literally a ton of other features that help us produce our code efficiently. They have options for debugging our code, finding out the mistakes after we have tested it and figure out that there are mistakes that we need to correct. They have auto-completion features. You start typing something and they give you suggestions on what you might want to use. They have many features that are very useful and make us more efficient programmers if we use them correctly. But they are a little bit more advanced in the sense that they might scare a beginner programmer. There are so many features there that a beginner programmer might not know where to start from, what is essential and what can be learned later. Anyway, around it, we will want to know how to just use an editor and a command line for several different reasons. And I will come back to those reasons in a little bit. Here I'm just showing you the website of the IDE that we will switch to later, and it is the IntelliJ IDEA IDE. It has a community version and another version that we need to pay for. The community version is perfectly fine for us to use. So IntelliJ IDEA is a very popular IDE for Java. Another very popular IDE for Java is called Eclipse. And also Eclipse has many of the same features as IntelliJ IDEA. A different IDE is the one that we saw at the Oracle website, NetBeans, very popular as well. We have chosen IntelliJ IDEA for several reasons, but this is not, it will be off topic to mention them now. Let me go back to our bullet points here and mention that one of the reasons that we want to use the editor and the command line, that we want to know how to use them, is that you may find yourself, now or later in your programming life, connecting remotely to a machine. When you connect remotely, most of the times you cannot use a window environment. And for this reason, being able to, from the terminal, to write down a program, for example, create a file, a .java file, and also compile and execute that file is very important. It's a skill that you need to know. So we will start with this mode, an editor and the terminal, and we will switch later to the IDE.